Hi everyone. I'm very honored to be here in front of a group of practitioners, as I come from more of a research perspective. And hopefully I can bring something interesting from this perspective to you here today. Let me begin by... Yes. By stating something very, very obvious, which is that human beings have been reading for centuries, and reading is actually one of the most fascinating and unnatural things that the human brain learned to do over the centuries. But, and that is a bit less obvious, reading and readers have only relatively recently become an object of interest in academia and in scientific and scholarly research in general. And it is not before the 50s or 60s that some scholars, especially literary scholars at the beginning, started to ask some questions about readers and the reading activity. And I mean, the 60s is very late, even for academia, which is not a word that moves very fast, as we know. So it's quite fascinating how late, in a sense, academic research was when it comes to reading and readers. So what I will try to do in this talk is to sort of pinpoint and select some concepts, some notions that research has been developing throughout its few decades of existence, and that I believe are useful, have been useful, and still are useful to understand reading, what is happening with reading, including what is happening with reading today in the digital revolution, which of course is an enormous change that is happening in reading and in reading practices. In order to do that, I thought about dividing my talk into four parts, or four chapters, if we want to stay in the book lexicon. So first of all, I would like to try to situate the phase that we are living in today within the long history of reading and books. The digital revolution completely disrupted, in some senses, but in some other it really didn't, the way we read and the way books are made and consumed and thought of by readers. So we'll try to go very quickly through the history of books, kind of going back to what Valerie was telling us about technological evolution and how this technological evolution really impacted the way books are perceived and thought of and appropriated by readers. Secondly, I have tried to select a few concepts that I still find fruitful to understand reading today, so including digital reading. And what is interesting is that these concepts were really not theorized with the digital book in mind and with the digital reading practices in mind. But I still believe that these concepts are still useful, and they really date back to the origin of the field of research of reading studies. They mostly come from literary scholars or anthropologists, because this is where I come from, but obviously this is only a partial view. But still, I think that this selection of context might be of some use to think about the reading act and the reading experience today. And thirdly, I would like to give you a very short and partial overview of what is happening today in reading studies. Reading studies is a big umbrella term that really captures a lot of different disciplines and a lot of different methodological and theoretical approaches. But what is happening today is that the actual readers, so the people in flesh and blood that read for pleasure, for learning, for whatever reason, are really becoming the center of attention of researchers. And now this is very awkward to say in front of a public of practitioners, but the actual readers have not always been the focus of research. On the contrary, for decades, the reader was this kind of abstract entity inferred by the text and kind of created in an abstract way. And no scholars really thought about asking and addressing real readers, actual readers, to learn about their actual everyday experience of reading. And now this is happening, and this is absolutely fascinating. So I will tell a few words about this relatively new phase of the research on reading today. And finally, I will briefly introduce a source, a type of data that is very commonly used in this field of research. So when we want to know what actual readers think about their books, their reading experiences, and so on, there are a lot of different data that we can turn to. But one of these type of data is what is commonly called reading testimonies. So that's readers who more or less spontaneously, more or less thoroughly talk about and discuss their reading experiences. They can do that in the form of letters, interviews, and of course online posts, online comments. And that's really a huge new plethora of data that is available today to researchers. So I will tell a few words about it, not only because I find it interesting, but it's also because it's really the focus of my research. So yeah, let's get started with this very, very short historical overview that really blends with what Valerie was saying. So there are a lot of different ways to tell the long story of reading in the Western world and of books in the Western world. I'm following here the storytelling of Roger Chartier, which is one of the most well-known scholars of book and reading in Europe. And according to Chartier, there are three big revolutions that happened in the history of books and consequently in the history of reading. The way books are made and created have as a huge influence. It's not only technological, it has a huge influence on how books and reading is experienced. So there was one first huge, enormous revolution that happened when we invented, well, when human beings invented the page. For centuries, the page did not exist as the main support of the written text. For centuries, humans scrolled, actually, and the reading experience was a continuum. The first type of book, if we may call it a book, is the volume and or the rotulus, and it was a type of book that was scrolled, so the reading was done in a continuous action, and the book was scrolled vertically or horizontally. This posed obviously an obvious problem of mobility. And the reading could not really be interrupted easily. It was a really different way of manipulating the text and of engaging with the written context. And then at some point, we invented the page. And the page completely changed the way books are consumed and are read and are approached. The page is a way to structure the written content and to make it more manageable. With the page, after the page came another series of technological improvements, such as the index, the page number, which made the reading experience something much more structured, but also much more fragmented in a way, because the book could be closed and opened again at any time, at any page, at any point. The index was a device that really allowed the reader to go back and forth, to interrupt its reading and start it again later, and so on. And for a long time, the volume and the codex coexisted, such as screen and paper coexist today, such as manuscript and a printed book. Books have coexisted for centuries. So it was not a revolution that happened overnight, obviously, even though for us today it's really hard to think the book in any other format that, other than the codex. But the codex was not always there. It was a huge revolution that completely started the way people read. And then there is, well, we skip very much ahead in time to the second revolution in the history of book, which is obviously the invention of printing. And when we think about printing, the first thing that we visualize, I think, is the press, right? This incredible machine that allow us to copy the books in an endless number of identical versions. But what was actually genius about the printing revolution was Gutenberg's and the other printers of the time's idea of really fragmenting the book, the written context, into its smallest unity. And that's the invention of the movable types. So the smallest unity of a text that can be assembled to create any text potentially. So all of a sudden we see the book and the text, the written content, as something that can be fragmented into a million pieces and rebuilt. And we start producing identical objects. The book becomes something that is perfectly reproducible. And that was not the case before, as well as you know, most of the copies were made by amanuenses, which meant that for one volume, there were 10, 5, 100 different versions. Two books were never the same. The amanuenses were people, they made mistakes, they had to make choices. They had to decide whether a sentence was in a way or the other. They skipped pages, they made annotations, so no two books were identical. And at some point we were able to reproduce a book into potentially endless identical object. And of course, there's also a lot of things that change in terms of usability of the book, which becomes something more portable, also cheaper, kind of a more of an everyday object as we see it and as we know it today. And again, the history, as always in the history of printing, the printing revolution in the history of book, the printing revolution is a phase of coexistence. Parchment coexists with paper, manuscript coexists with printed books, and so on. And we get, if we skip ahead very, very quickly in time, we get to the third, for now, revolution of the book and of reading, which is the digital revolution. And there are a lot of things that have been said about the digital revolution and how it changed the way reading is consumed and books are consumed. But one of the things that fascinates me the most is that the digital book really broke the unity of the written content and its support. A digital content can be read anywhere. It can be transferred on an iPhone, a tablet, an ebook, a personal laptop. So the written content gets gains autonomy from its physical support. And that's a completely new way of seeing the written content and the use and the sense of the support. So there are a few things that might be useful from this very quick overview, but I think the most important is that in the history of book, there are no dichotomies. The history of book and the history of reading is mostly a history of coexistence. coexistence of screen and paper today, coexistence of manuscript and printed books for centuries, and so on. And there are replacements, obviously, of course, but there are mostly long period of coexistence. And that's really something that the past shows us and tells us, and that is still very much applicable to what we are living now. That's a very brief overview of the history of reading that, as I said, has existed for centuries. But it's not before the 50s or mostly 60s that some scholars, especially literary scholars, started to ask some questions about the reading activity, the role of the reader with regard to the text. And the first questions about the books and the reader and the reading experience were asked by literary scholars who were used to think books only from the perspective of the author, only from the perspective of the only creator of the book, and not from the perspective of the receiver, who is also a creator, but we'll go back to that later. So it is in the 60s that some scholars really started to delve into reading and into the figure of readers. And there's a lot of work, interesting work, that has been done at the dawn of reading studies. What I tried to do here is to select some concepts, some notions that they were not at all conceived to be applicable to the digital revolution, but that, in my opinion, appear to still be very much applicable to what we are living and we know today. And they all date back to the 60s or the 70s. The first notion that I want to introduce very briefly, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this notion and with this author, is the notion of the death of the author. It was a very provocative essay, and which became sort of a slogan after that, that was proposed by Roland Barthes, so a literary theorist and critic and French critic. The idea is very simple, but very new at the time. We have to think the text from the perspective of the reader, not only from the perspective of the author. We are so used to consider the author as the only origin of the text, and the reader as sort of a passive recipient of the message of the author, that we completely forgot to acknowledge the transformative nature of the reading act. There is nothing passive about reading a text. Reading means transforming, not physical. Well, today it's also a matter of physical transformation, but interpreting a text means giving an existence to it. Roland Barthes is really one of the few of the first scholars to see and to acknowledge the reader as a creator. As a creative agent that participates, that makes the text come to life, very simply put. And this idea that the reader is also a creator and not just a passive recipient of the text is very much present today for obvious reason. And it's interesting to think that this idea of the reader as a creator dates way back before the digital revolution. And there are a lot of scholars of the time that tried to encapsulate and explain this active participation of the reader in the creation of meaning. And one other example that I really like and that I find to still be quite fruitful is the notion, is the comparison between the act of reading and the activity of a poacher in a forest. This idea was developed by an anthropologist and psychologist, Michel de Certeau, in the 70s actually, and he compares the reader to a poacher in the forest. And just like a poacher, a reader moves in an environment, and a narrative environment, which is the text, and interprets, understands it, resists to the message of the author. And by doing this, the reader transforms the environment. Just like a poacher, the reader is not a passive, a neutral actor in the environment of the text. The reader intervenes in the text. So the idea that the text, the content, but also the book as a physical entity is an environment seems to me to still be very, very interesting and useful today, thinking about the text as an environment in which the reader enters and that the reader necessarily alters with its ideas, with their expectation, their desire, their interpretations. There are also other notions that they are quite similar to this idea of reading as poaching, and I chose two of them. One of them was theorized by Umberto Eco, who was a semiologist, and Luisa Rosenblatt, who was a literary scholar but also an educator and a teacher. They respectively theorized the comparison between the act of reading and a cooperation between the author and the reader, and the act of reading is a transaction between the text and the reader. So according to Umberto Eco, every text, any text, has a model reader, an abstract, non-existent reader that is perfectly capable of reading the text exactly as the author thought and wanted the text to be read. This reader, this model reader, does not exist. It is in the author's head, most of the time, not even consciously. The model reader does not exist. But the actual reader can get closer or farther to this model reader by cooperating with the author in order to fill the blank, to interpret the text, to receive the text in the way that the author thought it. So any text creates a model reader, and it is very important for the people who work with text and study them to understand who this model reader is and how close actual readers go to this model abstract entity. And finally, according to Luisa Rosenblatt, reading can be compared to a transaction that happens between a text and a reader. Luisa Rosenblatt writes that reading comes into being in the live circuit set up between the reader and the text. So the text is not a fixed entity, but a circuit in which the reader enters with their emotions, with their needs, with their desire, with their knowledge, starting a transaction. The text proposes some meaning to the reader, and the reader inflates their real life into the text, transforming it and being transformed by it. It is a very modern idea that Rosenblatt is exploring. And again, we get really into this idea that reading is not a passive act. And this is as visible as ever today in the digital context. And finally, there is one last notion that I would like to bring up, which is the notion of the horizon of expectations of the reader, which may be a notion you are familiar with. And it was theorized by Hans Robert Jauss, so historian of literature and literary theorist, who had the intuition that, again, a reader and the reading act is not neutral. There are no two identical reading acts and reading experience, because every reader possesses a structure, a mind structure, that is made of all the knowledge, the desire, the preferences, the needs, the interest that this person has. And to a certain extent, this horizon is individual, is personal, is subjective. But to a certain extent, it is purely determined by historical factor. At some point, and in some place, in some context in history, readers expect some things, are prepared to some things, and are not prepared to other things, both in terms of content and in terms of support. So in order to evaluate the originality of a text, but also of a support, it is useful to try and reconstruct the horizon of expectation of the public, the first public for whom this text, this book was intended. An example that is always made is Madame Bovary by Flaubert, who was typically a text that completely disrupted the horizon of expectation of the time of the author. And it doesn't do the same today, obviously, the world has changed, but the horizon of expectation is a really useful concept to evaluate the impact of a book at a certain time in a certain context. And of course, the digital revolution and the digital book is something that to a certain extent disrupted the horizon of expectation of people that have been used to read on paper for centuries and for the entire life, anyways. And I think, for instance, that e-reader play in a particularly interesting way with the horizon of expectation, because they are still so close to the reading experience of turning the page, of sort of, they really try to imitate the act of touching, of flipping, of turning. So they don't completely disrupt the horizon of expectation of their public, and they give some elements of originality, obviously, because we don't have the paper anymore, but you kind of keep a very similar experience. So the horizon of expectation is not completely disrupted, but it is shaken. And I think it's an interesting experience, and in general, I think that this notion can really be fruitful to anticipate the reception, the responses to a certain type of book. It is a notion that has been really linked to the content of the book, but it's also very applicable to the format of the book, I believe, and of the two together, obviously. Okay, so these are just a few concepts, and I hope I didn't bore you too much with them. But my idea was just to give you some glimpses of how research thought the reading act and reading at the beginning. And there is something very important to say that is common to all these notions, that they were all that they were all created and theorized with a theoretical, abstract reader in mind. Nobody asked a reader, "Oh, do you feel like a poacher? Describe me your experience, please," and then created the context based on an empirical evidence. All of these concepts were created with an abstract reader in mind. An abstract reader that was inferred from the text, and that was very close to the author, to a scholar, to a reader with an extensive knowledge and a professional take on books. And again, it is very awkward to say in front of a public of practitioners, but the actual readers were really not in the picture back then. And still, I think that this concept still have a lot of value when we think about reading today. But the reader was really not in the picture. I mean, for years and decades, the research about readers were done without the readers. And it is only quite recently that the readers really enter in the picture, and they really now are at the center of the research that is conducted today. So it is time to tell you something about what research is doing today and how the actual readers, the people in flesh and blood who actually read in their spare time while doing other activities in their everyday life, how these people have become the center of a very interdisciplinary and big field of study. So yeah, academics just didn't really care about actual readers, and even less so about about the readers that are called ordinary readers. And by this term, I mean the 99.9 probably % of the readers that exist in the world and that engage with text because they want to, they like to, they want to learn something, or they want to, or they want to escape, to enjoy, to discover characters and plots and so on. These readers have been defined by Merv Emery, and I really like this definition, a kind of irritating background noise in the academic setting. It was always already present, of course. Without readers, book would simply not exist. But they were always unworthy of any serious or systematic considerations. Well, good news, these readers are now worthy of a lot of consideration. And I think it is important because without actual readers, the books would simply not exist. And literature also, which is my field of study, would simply not exist. Because without a reader, a text, it's just a support. It transforms when someone reads them. And it comes to life when someone reads it. So what does it mean to study actual readers? Well, there are so many ways in which we can approach actual readers. One thing that is happening today is that a lot of scholars from the humanities, and especially scholars with a literary background, turned toward the cognitive sciences to learn more about reading and how reading happens and what happens when we read. This happened for a lot of reasons, but there is one important revolution, scientific and intellectual revolution that happened, which has been the extraordinary development of cognitive sciences and of psychology over the past decades. And these disciplines really thought and discovered what happens during reading, what happens in the brain of a reader, what happens when a reader moves their hand to grab a text, to turn a page, how the body of a reader reacts, and how, to a certain extent, we can learn some things about the affective, the secret experience, the intimate experience of reading today, thanks to the extraordinary development of these fields. And this visibility, this development, has made visible and measurable the internal activity, the secret, the intimate activity of reading. Obviously, we cannot know what how a reader feels, and how a reader transforms intimately a book, but we can know what happens in their brain, how their body reacts, what they remember, what emotions they retain, and so on. And of course, this opened up a whole new playground for literary scholars, and not only for literary scholars, but again, because I come from a literary perspective, I tend to focus on this perspective. Why? Because it created a whole new plethora of data to which scholars now have access, and this data can really help us understand what happened, what is a reading experience. What are these data? Well, there are a lot of them. These include, for instance, MRI data. We can measure the brain activity of a reader during reading with different supports, for instance. Eye tracking data, how the eyes of a reader move on a page, on a screen, and so on. we can ask questionnaires during and right after the reading of a text, how much the reader remember, how much does this have to do with the format, with the support, what are the emotions that a reader retain right after, and do they change, they develop over time. And of course, we have a lot of oral and written records that we can use to learn more about reading experiences. Readers tend to read privately, but very often they feel like talking about their reading experiences in many different contexts. And today, obviously, digital platform gave an all new playground to readers to discuss their reading experiences. But I will go back to that. So, well, cognitive sciences really gave us access to an all new world of data about reading. And the other thing that happened is that technological tools, digital tools, were created to collect and treat this data effectively. For instance, I work with big amount of written data, and today we have a lot of tools, and that was way before AI. We have a lot of tools that allow us to read in a very rapid, quick and effective way vast masses of text, and to, for instance, I don't know, capture the lexicon that is used to describe characters, compare, I don't know, the written account of the reading of a romance and the reading of a thriller, and so on. So the technological development and availability of tools that allow to treat, collect, and analyze vast amount of data also gave a big input to the development of empirical approaches to the reading experiences. So it is really literary scholars kind of using, stealing and reinventing methods that were only used in cognitive sciences or scientific approaches to research, and transforming and reusing and repurposing these methods to study books, text, and literature and reading overall. So what kind of results and what kind of questions does this field of research ask itself? Well, a lot of questions, but I've tried to sort of select 2 or 3 just to give you an idea of also the amplitude of this field. And well, we are very lucky to have here a very important scholar in this field, who is Professor Mangen. And one of the questions that are really being asked today, and that is really, really relevant in the digital environment and during the digital revolution, is: does the experience of reading changes if we read on paper and on screen? To what extent does the support have an impact on how much the reader learns, how much the reader retains, how much the reader is capable to recount and tell about their reading experiences? This is a very complex, obviously, field of study. I won't enter into that, but what is certain is that there are differences. The format has an impact on the reading experience, but the long-term outcomes of these differences still need to be investigated. And surely, but I think we will come back to that during the roundtable, surely reading on screen creates a more fragmented experience of reading, especially if we read on an iPhone or a smartphone, and so we have a lot of other disruptions and distraction. But it is a very complicated field. I won't get into that, but it is really one of the questions that are being asked today. To what extent does the medium affect the experience of reading? Another question that is being really investigated today concerns the role of the artificial intelligence in the reading experience. We know that artificial intelligence today is able to write in a very creative way, even. How do readers react to texts that are AI generated? Again, it is a very, very complex field of study, so there are a lot of questions and not a lot of answers for now. But something that we know is that humans, readers especially, still have a very negative bias concerning text, AI-generated text. And if we ask artificial intelligence to choose between a text that is labeled as AI-generated and human-generated, even the artificial intelligence who has encapsulated this bias, this human bias, will go to the text, will choose the text that has been written by a human. So that's an interesting, even the artificial intelligence has a negative bias towards artificial intelligence for now when it comes to reading and creative text. Another thing that we can look at is another avenue, really interesting venue for research is the digital reading, digital social reading platforms, Goodreads, Babilio, and so on. There is a really gigantic amount of research that is done on these media. But one of the many things that we can see is whether the features of the platform have an impact on the way the reading experience is remembered and told. And for instance, I was part of a research in which we compared a very vast amount of comments and reviews, literary reading reviews, taken from a generic platform like Amazon and a dedicated platform like Goodreads was like back then before Amazon acquisition. We looked at that before Amazon acquired the platform, and we discovered that there are a lot of differences in how the reading experience is recounted on these two platforms. On Goodreads, readers really tend to delve into their emotions, what they learn from the text. They really want to share something that goes way beyond a simple qualitative evaluation of the book. And this last study really offers me the opportunity to go into the very last part of this presentation, which are reading testimonies. So one way of learning about reading is to study what readers have to say about their own personal reading experience. And how can we learn about everyday reading experiences? Well, in a lot of different ways. For instance, we can look at letters written by readers to their favorite authors. Today that would not be on paper, but still sometimes. But there is this very interesting study, for instance, in which two researchers studied some letters that were sent to a French philosopher from the 19th century by his readers. And it is fascinating to see the extent to which these readers were eager to share their personal experiences with these books, these philosophy books, and how these books had an impact, a real impact on their life, on their way of seeing life, and so on. So there are interviews, of course, that can be conducted with readers. There's this very interesting study that has recently came to an end, in which a team of scholars interviewed 100 of Croatian readers, asking them about their everyday relationship with books and how it developed throughout times. And it really gives us a picture of everyday reading practices in Croatia. And overall, there are a lot of very rare but very fascinating records of personal and intimate reading experiences. The last example that I want to share is this study that dates from 2018, which dealt with letters of Finnish readers who were fan of Lucy Maud Montgomery, the Canadian author, and had really fond memories of reading this author as children. And at some point, they wrote to a magazine to share their love upon request from this magazine. They wrote letters to share their love from this author, and for sharing memories from their childhood with reading these books. And again, this gives us a very unique view of what reading means to people and how books stick with people over time. So all these examples really help me to say that reading testimonies are a unique access, provide us with a unique access to the reading experience, as really they provide us insights on how readers transform text by interpreting it, by linking it to their life, to their everyday life, to their personal experience, and how readers are transformed by text. This dual transfer, so the reader transforms the text and is transformed by the text, is very well encapsulated, I think, by a scholar, a literary theorist, Marielle Massé, who has created the expression ways of reading, modes of being, to really capture this dual transfer between the book and the real life of readers. And obviously today, digital social reading platforms open up a new fascinating space to learn about actual real-life experiences with reading. These platforms like Goodreads, Wattpad, Babelio, and so on really provide researchers with a new, and publishers as well, of course, with a new corpus, infinite, endless corpus of data. And it really forces scholars to reassess conceptions of reading as a private, solitary activity. Today, readers have a lot of opportunities to share their reading experience, and they are keen to do so. Which completely also changes the way in which the reading act is thought of. It's less and less private, less and less intimate, and more of a social act, or an act that can be shared and that the readers want to share. So obviously this is a very interesting time for everyone, but for researchers as well. And there are a lot of things that we can learn by studying comments and interactions on platforms and websites such as Goodreads or other digital spaces. I'll go very quickly through this because I'm going a bit over time. But yeah, there are very, very interesting studies on Goodreads and how people share emotions in a very intimate way, how they feel part of a community of fellow readers in a space like Goodreads or other similar spaces. Studying these type of platforms also really help us to understand that young readers still exist, they still read, but they engage with text very differently. And Wattpad is an excellent example of a completely new way of engaging with text and becoming creators of text and not only readers. And here we go back to this idea that the reader is also a creator of text, a creator of meaning. And also, we observe that readers actively look for social spaces, for collective spaces to interact with other readers. They still do it offline, obviously. Reading groups still exist in libraries and bookshops and so on. They are even more popular today than a few years ago. But these spaces also exist online, obviously. And in both cases, it has been observed that this space can really become an opportunity for readers to share difficult experiences and to not necessarily overcome some difficulties, but to talk about difficult situation, and that really these groups, even online, can work as a space of well-being and collective therapy. To conclude very quickly, there is a few things I think that research can teach us about reading and reading today and reading practices today. One thing is that the digital revolution did not happen overnight, and it doesn't mean the disruption of what was there before. In a way, when we scroll today, we are back to the volume and we scroll again. Print still exists, has not been replaced. It is nowhere near being replaced. And it is important to know the past, to understand the present, and to anticipate the future of reading. We also can learn that current reading practices, call for theoretical framework. We need concepts and we need notions to understand, to put words on the evolutions of reading, of the ways we read, we have read in the past and we read today. Theoretical notions are not just a nice ornament, but really they can be a structure to think of reading today, what reading is today. And also, good news, scholars today and publishers as well, and practitioners in general, have a very wide range of evidence that they can use to study and to investigate the reading experience, and we should make very good use of it. Okay, I'll stop here, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Elena. Do we have questions, comments, remarks? Yes, coming to you.
Thanks so much for your talk, very thought-provoking. I'm having a good time thinking about things today, in general, but especially now. So you really make me think about this duality of humans, I think, where on the one hand we are always sort of in our own mental brain bubble spinning abstract thoughts, and then on the other hand we are these social creatures that want to then share those bubbles, and we want to be understood by others, like we're doing right now. So my question is, through this history of books and texts, are we always the same, or are these technologies changing us? And into the future, do you see us like radically changing the way we create books and read books, or is it like we're just sort of doing the same thing but in different forms?
That's an excellent question, and I really don't have the pretension to have an answer to it. But I think that what is happening today, especially with the digital social reading platforms, is that the 99.9% of readers that are out there have a chance to talk about, to discuss their reading experience. And maybe that was always a desire. I don't know, but it is sure that today there are spaces in which these readers can act like critics, can act like literary critics, can share their thoughts, can intervene even on text, and that is new. That is completely new. Maybe it only made possible something that was already there, but it is sure that we have never had so many possibilities and so many venues to talk about reading. And what we find out is that people are very eager to talk about reading. But even if you talk to, so for my PhD, I worked on a big corpus of letters written by readers. So at any time, every time that people ask me, "Oh, what are you working on?" "Ah, I'm working on reading experience." "Oh, I have to tell you, this the last book I read, so good." And so people are really eager to talk about their reading experiences, their favorite books, how an author changed their life, and so on. And I think what is happening today is that we finally have a chance to do so. And so I don't know if it is a behavior that is intimately human and that today it can finally manifest. But for sure, this is new. The possibility of sharing so much is new. Yeah, that only very partially answered your question, but
let's keep thinking about this stuff, right? And
yeah.
Talking.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Hello.
Hi.
I think you did a wonderful job.
Thank you.
I really liked the thing you told about reading testimonies. Those are very good, and it's interesting that they have only began to do reading testimonies quite recently. And I think some of the people doing where the reading testimonies are conducted are very passionate and eager to talk about their reading experience. I am a user researcher for low literate readers, so I am very curious about those who are not eager to talk about their reading experience, and as if it is good that it's now being integrated, but I'm always interested, do you know of academic work that is being done on negative reading experience?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was my question. Or maybe it's just a comment, I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a super interesting question. So there are two things, I think. One is not every reader wants to share their reading experience, and that's perfectly fine. And reading still is primarily an intimate and domestic activity that we do on our own. What is new today, as I said, is there are so many occasions to share. Which was not the case. And it is true that when we think about sharing reading experiences, we think about positive reading experience, and as a result, a lot of research has been conducted on positive reactions or profound reactions to books. And there are some studies that indeed found this blind spot and said, but we don't know anything about boring experiences, negative experiences, books that people really hated, or even worse, that they just forgot about. And this is a super interesting cognitive process and affective experience. And there is, to my knowledge, much less research on that, but there is some. Because there is so much less evidence, especially when it comes to reading testimonies. But with other type of data, for instance, all the MRI measures or eye tracking measures, you can very much also well capture boring or kind of not effective reading experiences, where a reader reads something and just immediately forgets about it. It is a very, very interesting and kind of...
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot to be done with regards to information retention or well, when we're talking about accessibility, like, well, I think maybe the academic focus could shift not only to collecting the joy of reading, but also collecting the struggles with those who aren't getting their access. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Good,
and I
very
agree
good
with
answer.
you.
Other questions?
Often we see that these testimonies that, are on whole works, and one thing I'm very curious over the years was the need for a standard for annotations on specific parts, because there were not really good standards. I know that Idea Lab now has taken the very nice job to make this standardized, so we could make a framework basically where people can share much more directly on certain sentences or certain paragraphs. What for kind of possibilities do you see there?
I think that's more of a question possibly for Michael, or it is a very interesting question. I really don't have the skills to answer it. I don't know. But maybe we can discuss it during the round table. I think there are people who are better fit than me to answer this question, but it's very good one.
We are taking notes.
Thank you for all what you said. You talked about the abstract reader, this very unknown reader. And last month, I've heard of a new kind of reader. It's an artificial reader. I heard that some publishers are building artificial readers, some personas with AI, and they give them a manuscript to read in order to help the publishing decision. And I wanted to know if you heard of that and what you are thinking about this new kind of reader.
That's very interesting. Yeah, it's not surprising because now we have the technology to envision this type of reading. Does it have much to do with the abstract reader as of the 60s? I'm not sure, because I don't know the extent to which this artificial reader takes the author into consideration and the will of the author into consideration, and to what extent the interpretation is a part of this artificial reading process. I really don't know how it works. In a sense, it's really interesting that we are back to a non-real, not a real reader, but an artificial one. But I wouldn't say that's an abstract reader either, because it is built on actual readers. It tries probably to capture exactly the way in which a normal, ordinary reader would think. Whereas the abstract reader, that would be my answer, but there are many interpretations, I guess. But the way the abstract reader was actually a textual entity. It did not try to imitate an ordinary reader. On the contrary, it was closer to the author and to the scholar than to the ordinary reader. So I wouldn't say that it's the same thing, but definitely it is interesting that today, a few decades later, we are back to disembodying the reader. That's very interesting, definitely.
Sorry. I have a little caveat. I guess in these questions like AI reader, doing qualifications of a text or an author, we kind of humanize or personalize the machine and forget that the machine is a machine which responds based on material that we fed into the machine, and now we ask questions that do nothing more than retrieving what was fed and structured by us in the machine. So, of course, it's obvious for me, and I was really smiling when I listened to this, it is obvious that, for instance, Michael Tamblyn might in the next step say, okay, I program an agent that represents my mothers, which he said defined as the most valuable readers to target, and then has these artificial mothers reading and qualifying the text and producing the marketing language, etc., etc. Obviously, that's how machines of AI works. We can define an agent doing this. But then it makes little sense, and it's really redundant to say, oh, the machine prefers texts that we defined as human written against other text or the same text when we define it as machine written, because we gave it these preferences as a structure. So we must be careful in avoiding that kind of redundancy and humanize or personalize these machines. They are tools, powerful tools that we can use to benefit or also to produce crap, yeah. And therefore, I guess it's very important to be methodologically very, very sharp and keen. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And what is interesting and what is valuable to research, I think, is that these machines have biases that are human, but humans are not always conscious, rationally conscious of those biases that they created. So here research can tell us something interesting about what the biases are, which are humanly created but completely escaped the control, and they're not conscious. So, for instance, the study that I quoted really highlighted the extent to which the machine had acquired this negative bias toward the machine, which is a gigantic paradox, and it is something that possibly a human is not necessarily conscious of. So, but yeah, definitely, these are tools, powerful tools, but human created tools, for sure.